It is my great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Mercè Crosas from Harvard. Dr. Crosas is the University Research Data Management Officer for Harvard University IT and the Chief Data Science and Technology Officer for Harvard's Institute for Quantitative Social Sciences. She's been deeply engaged in many different aspects of open science. In particular, she was the co-leader of both the Dataverse project, which is a major data sharing effort, and more recently, OpenDP, which is an open source differential privacy project. And she was one of the co-authors of the original FAIR principles, which have been sort of a guidepost for thinking about how to make open science happen. So we really appreciate you joining us today, and I will hand over the screen to you.
Thank you, Russ. Thanks very much for the introduction. I'm going to share the screen. And first of all, well, thanks for the invitation. And also, just wanted to congratulate you in the starting and the launch of the course, and it just seems a fantastic center, and with a group of people involved. I'm sure it will be a success. I'm jealous that this is happening. It's a really nice idea for a university. So good for you to get this started, and I wish you the very best. So today I'll be talking about enhancing collaboration with and access to data. We'll be focusing on how we can make data more open. Not always is fully open, but how to make it more accessible throughout the research life cycle. And I'll be talking from the perspective of my two roles. So they're quite distinct. Different roles. One with the IQSS, that I've been there for more than 15 years, the Institute for Quantitative Social Science. I'm working more, like Russ said, on leading the Dataverse project, and now more recently the OpenDP, and also working on other open source tools for improving research, and improving open science in general. So, but the university role is a more an administrative role or IT role into providing the support that researchers need in the university for being able to manage data, following best practices and accessing data. So there are a lot of complements, but you will see that throughout the presentation that there are differences about how, well, things that the universities need to think about versus things that all of us as researchers also, or institutes or centers that we promote open science can contribute to that. Yes. Let me get started. As you know, and as is very relevant in the time that we're living, the initial sharing of data related to COVID-19 was well, extremely important to make to foster a lot of the research that was done in the first months and understand the virus from a large set of disciplines, and this open COVID-19 data curation group had a lot to do with it. What we saw that after the early February release of that data, and together with other data that had been was made available through and as open as possible, always with taking into account that not everything can be made open. We saw that a huge increase, and even more compared to in the past, what had happened for other pandemics. So other issues related to epidemiology, that this open data, the sharing of data, contribute to this huge release of preprints and also published papers. You'll see here in this article from Significance magazine that show some of the plots that indicated that about 10,000 papers were published in this in COVID in the first 100 days. Obviously, it's not only because of the access to open data, but it's also the importance of the issue itself, but it had a big contribution that we had data that we could use to do research and to be able to publish as fast as possible. In this article, it points out that during the pandemic, conflicting information can undermine trust in science. Openness and the sharing of data enable researchers to collaborate, review, and reproduce findings, and such activities as strengthen trust in science. This is obviously for the group here and for CORES is something that you know well, but I think the reminder about the trust in science also, that is openness and transparency improves the trust in science, is also an important one to keep into account when you're thinking about putting the best practices and implementing open science tools for a center and for your researchers. So as Janet Napolitano said, since the novel coronavirus track, scientific research has been shared and built upon at an unprecedented pace. An open and deeply collaborative academic enterprise has emerged with scientists from around the world sharing data and working together. We must not revert to our old ways. So yes, we must not revert. There's still a lot to do also, but I wanted to show first the progress that we've made in the last decade related to data sharing and access to data for research. First in a global way, and then within universities through services that are provided for research data. So first, some of the advances relate to how the journals have, in some cases, encouraged and in some cases require the sharing of data. And we can see that in an example here for social science journals. We did a study about 2 years ago, which we're now, by the way, we're revisiting this. What I'm showing here is the data from this couple of years ago, but we're revisiting for a new publication with some of the latest data on data policies. But here we took the data policies from the 50 top journals in 6 different disciplines, so 50 of each from each discipline, from within what we categorize as social science, although there was history that it fits in sometimes into humanities, but it included anthropology, economics, history, political science, psychology, and sociology. And as we see here, the red is the percentage of journals that didn't have a policy, and that's more accentuated in history and sociology. And then for the blue, it's the policies that the language indicated an encouragement, a recommendation, but not a require, and the green was a require. And that, if we see that in economics, psychology, and to some extent in political science, the requirements were in general just the recommendation and requirement policies were a bigger fraction, but they had even more that required, right? About 36% in economics and 30% political science. I think these numbers have grown. That's what we're seeing in with the latest data. But that's already an indication that these policies, I mean, we did see from other studies also that the strictness did help, so that it is followed a lot more when the policy require have a stronger language than if it's just recommended, as we would expect. But that's something also to take into account as we're thinking about editors of the journals, about what language and how they describe the policy. The other ways that the data sharing has advanced, it's through the federal agencies and foundations that require this data management and data sharing. So in particular, I just want to point out the changes that have been done now to NIH for the data management and sharing, and that were released in the fall of 2020, but they will become effective in 2023. So in this case now, NIH encourages, as part of also the language of the data management and sharing policy, says that it encourages data management and sharing practices to be consistent with the FAIR principles, the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles, and reflective of practices within specific research communities. So as Raz pointed out earlier, that I've been involved in the FAIR principles as one of the co-authors, and after that working on several other publications that relate to how to implement these FAIR principles. And it is nice to see that those are getting endorsed by the level of federal agencies and being recommended as something to follow to promote open science. And Francis Collins also points out that this policy establishes the baseline expectation that data sharing is a fundamental component of the research process. So I think we're convinced of all that, but it's nice to see that there is this support from both journals and funding entities are helping to make that happen. There is also the very important support or organization and coordination from some scientific communities. I mean, similar to what CORES is planning to do. There are some communities that have come together, some disciplines or some area domain, scientific domains, where they have put statements on their position on what how to treat data and about data sharing. So in particular, you probably know a lot of the efforts that have been done related to the Earth and space science, and there is a position statement that it's nice to read the entire thing, but I just point out this part of it that says that robust, verifiable, and reproducible science requires that evidence behind an assertion be accessible for evaluation. So researchers have a responsibility to collect, develop, and share this evidence in an ethical manner that is open and transparent as possible, because again, not always is possible. So this is what probably all the group here already believes, but again, these communities research of some researchers making a commitment to do that has helped advance open science and data sharing. And then the one that is closer to the projects that we have contributed within IQSS and with the Dataverse project is that this is an increase on domain-specific and generalized data repositories, right? There are a lot of options that didn't exist 10 years ago, and there are places for researchers to go and share the data, making it available and be also connected or linked to a specific paper or finding a scientific claim. So in the example of Dataverse, which we started in 2006, we now have Dataverse itself is the open source software platform that helps you build a data repository and host a repository for your research data. But there are many types of these data repositories. There are now currently 67 sites or installations of the repositories that can be federated and can share metadata across them. So and they are really in most continents, and they also they represent. In some cases, one university, but in some cases, a consortium of 20 universities, in some cases, a research organization, for example, for agriculture data, that is a global international organization. And in some cases, it has we provide also a general purpose repository like we do with the Harvard Dataverse repository that is open to everybody. So altogether, those Dataverse repositories have 8,000 Dataverse collections or virtual repositories, 140,000 data sets, 900,000 files, and there's been 30 million downloads of those files. And as I said, the metadata is shared across. We have a lot of the development done in the, within our team at IQSS, but there is also a Dataverse community, a large set of contributors, a very engaged, active community that are also participate in the coding, in the testing, in the requirements, in many ways to improve the Dataverse open source software. And also we created just about a year ago the Global Dataverse Community Consortium that helps to support all these installations around the world to make their repositories more sustainable, and to provide DOIs and several other services, common services across the repositories. Here, I'm just pointing out the Harvard Dataverse in particular, just because it's open to all researchers, and we have worked with researchers across many universities and journals. About 80 journals are using the Harvard Dataverse repository as the first recommended repository to share data and they're associated with the articles. So there is also progress in general within the universities in how we support research data and computing services. And just want to point this out because it's also important that if as you're working as part of a university, how are you connecting or collaborating with other units of the university to provide the services that will help with open science? So even if the focus is on just in general accessing research data, providing computing, but if there is a clear collaboration with a center that fosters open science with those units, you could provide the right tools for the researchers. So what I want first to point out is a report that had recently been published that looked at 120 US universities and looked into what it would be, well, what are the research, how are the research data services distributed across the university, who's providing them, and what type of services are available. This is not by any means an exhaustive study of all the universities, and also it's based on defining research data services. Anything that was found in a website from each university that indicated that provided a support for researchers related to handle, manage, share research data. So the libraries were and the IT departments were the main providers. The libraries probably was first with the largest numbers of service offerings, and they focus on consulting, training events, and also some more collaboration or support that was in data architecture or metadata design or front end with data visualizations, etc. Outside the libraries and IT, though, they found a lot of services offerings that were more specialized, as you would expect, on statistics, on bioinformatics, on geospatial and clinical data, business data, social science in general, and data visualizations. So, yes, let me show you here from the libraries. We see that the type of data service they support are the largest ones are related to consulting. But then there was also these training events and front-end work and back-end work. And it was much more general in general, for data in general, not specific to geospatial or statistics and so, but there is some support and more in geospatial and statistics than the other one, the digital humanities and health sciences. This was from the library perspective. That if we look at data services that are done by institutes or centers, like would be CORES if it is planning to do something like that, as Raz was talking about in the introduction. So that there would be, those are usually found if you look at the bright blue lines, which is for R1 universities with very active research, like Stanford would be, or Harvard would be. So the main service is around statistics, and then bioinformatics from mostly from medical schools, professional schools, and so, and then we see all the rest of services around specific type of data here in this plot. So what are we doing at Harvard that it's sort of aligned with this, what was found in this report of the 120 US universities? So as many institutions have found, we needed, well, there was a need for an increase on research data and computing services that are aligned with the increase of data-centric and data science research done in the university, and also a need to be able to support funders and journal requirements. And we saw that there were a lot of services formed that were distributed across schools and units in the university, but not yet. I mean, a couple of years ago, before the role I have now as a university-wide research data management officer, they were not necessarily coordinated across the university. So what we've done since then is just bring stronger collaboration between the Vice President for Research and research groups, the library and IT and research computing. And this agreement or alignment across these units is very important in terms of providing more services that will help with access to data, with open science in some way, and access to computing, but following the best practices. We built an inventory of what those services, the existing services, as they were, we found them again distributed across units. So there was not an existing catalog, so we had to create in the last 2 years a catalog to first understand what is that exists now and how we standardize the information about what exists, so researchers can find easily what is available for them. Because a lot of times you might find that the experience that there are a lot of tools, a lot of resources, a lot of information that the university support, but but it's not easy to understand how to compare them, what they are good for, what exists out there, unless you are connected to a unit that provides these services. So what we did then is create a research support site that it's gonna be launched in the next weeks, or announced. It already exists, but it's gonna be announced more widely to have all these service offerings to support research in the posted or displayed in a common way, in a unified way, so in a way that it's easy to compare one with the other. And we plan to do in the next phases of this support an analysis to find the gaps of what it's missing, and then connect the services, the tools, and the team, so that we continue coordinating and integrating tools to provide a better experience, and one that can help with provenance and maintaining and creating a well, capturing the workflow of the research computing or the changes to data in a way that it makes it easier then to share that and to make that that open and be understood and be able to be reused by others, right? Because it's often the problem. How do we do that so somebody else can actually use what we've done? So, and then we're also working on fostering a community of all these teams and groups and so that provide services that help improve the research within the university and improve in particular access to research data, management of research data, and computing in a way that then will help also for open science and for best practices, but in a response, always keeping in mind the compliance and responsibilities. So this website includes a research life cycle that has a planning phase where there are services that relate to access and reuse of data, plan and design, an active research section that it's about collecting and creating and analyzing and collaborate, and another one then in dissemination and preservation. We just to give a quick example, that for planning there are 12 service offerings. I don't plan to go through each one of them, but I'm happy to answer questions. I will give an example though about one of the services that has been created in the last year, I would say, yeah, I believe it's in the last year, for data use agreement processing. So it's a group that helps on a system, data DOA system and safety system that helps track all the incoming, the data use agreements associated with incoming data and also for outgoing data. And then that system helps manage and track these data use agreements, helps with the negotiation, and it connects with other parts of the university like IRB and security officers. So that's one of the examples. For active research, there are 19 service offerings here that we found, and this is not yet a complete collection of all the units that provide some resources or services throughout the research life cycle, but it's the first pass, right? So the 19 service offerings might not be yet complete, but here are some examples. And one of the examples that we provide at IQSS that it's similar to maybe what some statistical departments provide. It's a consultation with General for Social Science support. We have the, but more specific to quantitative methods, to statistics, but also to just using tools to do your research in a more effective way and thinking. It doesn't have to focus as a course on open science only, but we do bring that as part of the conversation and as part of what we provide as training materials and as tools to use. So there are some workshops, and there are also in some cases longer term collaborations with parts of the university that are doing some data science work. So there is also the part of dissemination and preservation. I've been working more in the last 15 years with the Dataverse, and in this case, one of the more recent services that connected to the Dataverse repository is providing curation services. A lot of the time, like for a repository like Dataverse, where it is you do a self-deposit of the data. The data depositor or the data owner might not had all the information that is needed for somebody else to reuse the data. these data curation services are very focused on the FAIR principles and trying to think of all the data, all the organization of the data, and in a way that you would, well, that data could be reused, not only for verifying existing claims or publications associated with the data, but also in general to reuse to advance science in that area, right? So one of the ways that that these repositories can provide support to create a more trusted and repository where the data is good quality and can be reused is by getting a core trust seal. So we're working on getting managed collections within the Dataverse repository that could be assigned or get the certification of a core trust seal for preservation, for good curation and best practices. So I've gone through some of the progress of things that we've been doing, both more globally to improve data sharing across research domains and well, in an international way through repositories and through best practices and data principles like the FAIR data principles, but also how we have made progress within the universities with providing the support for research in a way that is aligned with helping with tools that are, when possible, open source, that are about sharing the data in a responsible way, and just helping to provide these data services and computing services in a way that also help with open science. So, but that's not all, right? We still have a lot of work to do, and we still there are some challenges still that exist with the things that have been done so far with the repositories and with the tools that are provided and the connections of all those tools, and also with the research data services that universities provide. So what is the vision and what are things that we're working on? So one of the visions could be, or one way of thinking about a vision is what Robert Grossman, that was part of, was one of the PIs, where he was part also as one of the other PIs in the NIH Data Commons Consortium initiative a few years ago. We talked about the concept of the data commons, and Grossman defined that in a way that it's been reused a lot, because it just helps to understand what we mean by data commons, and what are the benefits, and what does it bring beyond just having repositories and having tools. So it brings together the data with cloud computing infrastructure, or with it could be more extensive with research computing infrastructure, and commonly used software services, tools, and applications for managing, analyzing, and sharing data to create an interoperable resource for research, for the research community. So that's in some way where we want to go, and we still have challenges to get there. So we don't want things to be just separated, right? To have here a repository, here the tools for doing the research, but not having in a way that are integrated to. We want to facilitate to go from active research to this dissemination, so that it's part more of the same workflow. So one of the challenges is that is with the context, documentation, and provenance, that we don't have. Often we don't have sufficient information to reuse the data. We have often incomplete code to reproduce results. even with a lot of the code that is shared in Dataverse. We've done some studies with Anna Trajsovic, one of my postdocs, that show how much of the 80% of the code would not execute automatically if you just use it from what it's been deposited, right? Just directly. So often the code, it takes a lot of time to make the code work, even when it's shared. And there is a lack of data source and transformation, so the stem validity, lack of this provenance. So one of the things that we're working on in Dataverse through some working groups with the Dataverse community that in fact are meeting. There was a meeting earlier today, this morning, and if any of you in the audience are interested in joining a Dataverse working group to discuss any of these topics, please contact me, because there are active groups that are getting started in how to do that better. So what we want to do here is to be able to capture this workflow from all the way from a data management plan to the data use agreements that might be associated with the data sometimes or not, right? But if they are, we want to capture that as part of the data, the code, the workflows, the notebooks, code books, and so, and have a package that in some cases is a replication package or reproducibility package to reproduce the work. In some cases, more generally, a container that encapsulates the data, the code, and the environment for this research workflow, right? And then choose some of the packaging standards, like there are some DB bags, or in this case for the Research Data Alliance has defined a set of bags that with a standardization of those bags that we support now in Dataverse. And also there is the research objects crate that is a metadata schema that helps support research objects that could include data, code, workflows, and more notebooks, and so. So this is ongoing work now to try to capture this workflow with standardized containers. And those containers, like Docker containers, exist, as we know. The question is that, the next thing we need to do is not only to facilitate packaging all the research workflow with this type of containers or with other packaging standards, but also making sure that it does follow some standards and best practices to document the containers so it's easy to reuse, because it's not that's not always the case otherwise. So another area that is still a challenge and that we want to improve is this vision of a data commons with Dataverse is the collaborations, right? It's still not easy to, or at least from the repositories point of view, they don't provide a way of collaborating with the data easily. It's often, well, we deposit data sets after the publication or after the research project is complete, but we would want to find also what are the research data sets that are used by my community, my university, or my research community that I might be able to collaborate with while they are active. It's also not always easy to access the data from one organization to another, and there's often a lot of duplicative and costly efforts, even within a university. That are one of the things that I'm trying to improve with in my university role, to see where are we, well, in collaboration with many others, but how do we eliminate these duplications of working with the same data sets, even within the institution or the same environments, to provide access to same data, but how we reduce this level of duplication. So one of the things that we're not resolving yet all the problems around this area, but we're making some steps towards that. One of the things that we're working as part of another Dataverse metadata working group that focus on registries, and the idea that having a registry for active research data or for or a catalog of data sets for within an institution or a community, right, that would want to share, well, first that the data themselves might not be in the repository, but might point to another repository or another location where the data can be accessed, and it's restricted, but it can be accessed for collaborators. But you can make the cataloging searchable and make that part open, so it allows for more collaboration if you know what other researchers are what data other researchers are using. Not always is possible to then provide access to others, but at least it allows not to repeat the same efforts of trying to get that data if somebody else, some other groups are working on it, and you could perhaps share it and make it possible to collaborate on that data. So the other issue that we see is that sometimes with very large data sets or complex data sets that you don't want to just have in the repository and have to download in order to use it. You want to find it in the repository, be able to work on it in the cloud. So the work that we're doing related to that is connecting or integrating the repository, in this case for the Harvard Dataverse repository, but it could be done for other Dataverse repositories that are installed or that are hosted around the world, so that this integration is with the research computing and the cloud computing provided at Harvard, and with the extensions of this cloud research computing that are going to happen in the next 5 years, with a lot more storage and with what is called the New England Research Cloud that will be built on top of the OpenStack open source cloud software. So in addition to cloud vendors that exist out there, that could be an option to use to have your data there and have the metadata in the repository, but open the data in the cloud. There could be also the option of using this, the NERC or the New England Research Cloud, that it will be an open source cloud. So another large issue that we're working on, and a big challenge when we're talking about an open science, about a data commons, or about sharing data in general, is the sensitive and proprietary data. We know that not all data can be open, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be necessarily a binary choice of completely closed or completely open. So how do we can build ways of tier access to the data depending on their the sensitivity, the required security requirements, and level of sensitivity of the data. And also there are many challenges of getting to agree on these data use agreements to bring data, sometimes from industry to data from hospitals. And so if we have platforms that are environments, that are secure computing environments that fulfill the requirements, it would make this negotiation easier. So we're working in all these areas, and in a couple of different ways from different perspectives. So one is looking at how we classify the data based on these data tags that go from completely open to cases that data need to be completely restricted for maximum sensitivity, which is very few cases, but it's the extreme case. So it goes then from blue to green, yellow. The yellow would be that it's restricted, but not necessarily have sensitive data is restricted because contractual data or for other limitations or for during an embargo or so. And then we go into the sensitive data tags where the data need to be stored in an environment that follows the requirements for sensitive data. And that could be HIPAA, FERPA, or following a FISMA moderator, so requirements, so that would allow for this data to be stored in a safe way. But it's still what we want to promote is that the metadata, or at least the part of the metadata, can be open to make that open. So how do we do that? And by the way, this was published in an article that we got with Latanya Sweeney and Michael Barsinai. It's already been used in some cases for the Technology Science Journal and for other. It's part of some of the groups in Europe, but also implementing it. But we've been working on integrating that with Dataverse, and also it's sort of inspired by there are 5 security levels that we use at Harvard. So we're trying to map the requirements and rules for those levels to these data tags. So the idea then with being able to classify the data in these ways and be able to have at least discovery the data through the public repository, but only the blue, green, and yellow data could exist in the repository itself, or it could be stored in the repository, but the orange and red would have to be stored elsewhere in an approved secure computer environment. Well, it would be in a data enclave, or what we call a trusted remote storage agent. This is a term used in this project that is called Impact, that we've been working with them from Renzi Institute and the University of North Carolina. But the idea of the work in progress is integrating this with Dataverse, and the group in North Carolina have done much of that already for the instance of Dataverse, but not every instance of Dataverse is using that yet. So, and there is between those, the secure environment and storage, and computer environment and storage, and the public repository, there is this notary service that would allow for being able to digitally sign the attestations that would confirm the compliance, right, of the data use agreement, so that it would, I mean, ideally this we would integrate with machine actionable data use agreements in a way that would make it possible to just track the agreement and force the requirements of the data use agreement into the environment that is needed for using the data and storing the data. One final part of this is the differential privacy tools work that we're doing with OpenDP. Raz also mentioned that in the introduction, that one of the projects that we're working on is the OpenDP open source project, OpenDP for differential privacy. For those familiar with differential privacy, the differential private algorithm is one that introduces a minimum amount of noise to release statistics to mathematically guarantee the privacy of an individual in the data set. That's one way of defining it, our focus is in building a community effort with open source tools, and a set of data privacy tools. That one of the main part of the core of OpenDP is a library that provides a large set of algorithms for supporting differential privacy. And then there is another part of the OpenDP that it's part of the commons of the OpenDP. There is a set of tools that one we're building now is a web application that would allow from a repository be able to choose a specific statistic that you want to apply to your data, and build a differential private statistic release of that for that statistic chosen, and be able to then make that openly available through the repository. So basically, by just using a privacy loss parameter, the epsilon of differential privacy, and choosing into what variable do you applying that to, and choosing what statistic you want. You would you wanted to calculate the differential private results, you would create a report. There is a differential private report based on that statistic. We're planning to launch in the spring of 2021 the web application and the library, at least the MVP, or the minimum viable product of the library, and then built on top of that. So I wanted to finish with a couple of things. First, saying that when we were thinking about a solution that could be a data commons could be within a university, within a research, an institution, a research community, we need to take into account that we need to avoid building data commons that are silos, and that they're not talking to each other, and that we then make it just a data science computing solution or data science environment for each university or for each research group, but we don't allow for this interoperability, right? So we need to build that with standards, agreement of standards in mind. And that's why we're working on these working groups, these metadata working groups with Dataverse, and in some cases in collaboration with other working groups that from, for example, CODATA, or from RDA, or from bringing groups from the DDI, the Data Documentation Initiative, to just be able to make sure that what we're building will support these standards, and will help we have an agreement of what standards are we using across these data commons, so that the way that, for example, the research object or the capturing the entire workflow or containers is packaged is also following a standard, so it makes it possible to be understood and pass from one data commons to another. The same with the use of persistent identifiers, with the authentication of standards and APIs. So that would be the final, or what we would like to see at the end, is that all these institutions have these data science, open science infrastructures and environments that can easily integrate with each other. So I just want to then finalize with summarizing the things that I think are important, and I wanted to leave. I believe there will be time for questions, so I want to leave time for that or any discussion. So first, the part of it was this new university role has made me think a lot about what universities should be thinking of in terms of also promoting or improving the way that research is done within the university. So I do think there's an importance about collaborating across research and perhaps of research offices and related offices with the library and the IT units. It's important to understand what exists there, what are the resources and the services that are provided across units in the university, and how do we coordinate across those services, because there is a lot that it's already. In general, we find a lot of it just because there has been the need in the last years for centers for it's each school, each institute or so provide their own services. There are many that already exist, and we can take advantage of those and look at which ones make sense to be distributed and which ones make sense to centralize just because it's too costly. For example, in the case of supporting sensitive data, and even more if you need to support a FISMA moderate environment. It's one of the things we're realizing it is important, and in these cases to unify the service and the environment in a way that it has that it's at the very least very coordinated across schools, because it's a complex problem to support this type of sensitive data. So and a costly one, mostly. And then also the importance of building workflows, and at some point as intelligent workflows as we could build in terms of automated workflows that might take advantage of methods of ML and AI. So to integrate all the services and tools and with the computing resources and the repositories. And then for this proposed idea of the data commons with Dataverse, that we're working on different aspects of it already. We will see that what we expect to see is that it will help lower the barrier to first finding active research data, in addition to already data that has been published, because the papers have been are already out there. So also being able to track better and access data for collaboration, and having the data closer to computing to be able to work on the data after you find it, be able to distribute the data from one system or one data commons or one environment to another in a standardized form, so it can be easily reused in other environments. And then finally, the work that we're doing with OpenDP and data tags to sharing sensitive data and private or data from companies, regulated data or contractual data for research, so that we provide more access to data that comes from industry, government, and academia that now often it's hard to get. So thanks, everybody. I'm happy now to answer questions. Thanks.
That was awesome. Thanks very much for joining us. I'll read the questions from the Q&A. There's one from Michelle Mello, ex-Harvard faculty member. The amount of technical work done here to facilitate data sharing there is amazing. What is the university doing to alter the ethos of its promotion and tenure processes to shift the culture in the same direction?
Very good question. Hi, Michelle. Thanks. It's nice to hear the question from you. I mean, the easy answer would be this is not my role, honestly, unfortunately, not enough as probably should. I think there is interest from some faculty, some of the researchers that are more ambassadors of making open science a success, that are pushing that direction. I think there has been some small steps towards, like, for example, creating in the activity reports that researchers provide annually to be able to support more things than just publications and books, but data, code, and so as part of that report, and that be considered directly to. I mean that is one directly to how this impacts tenure and promotions, and so it's not if there is some work, it's not been very open yet. I mean, if there are some, again, I've been in discussions and everybody thinks to agree that would be important, but I think implementing it, it's harder. And I maybe turn that question to you, that if you have any advice on how to help with that, because I've been focusing a lot on the things that we can do from the services and technology point of view to help with that, and to improve research that in a way that it is open. And but it's always, sometimes you get that from, well, it's hard to that always doesn't come top down, basically.
Yeah, I think we will be talking about these issues a little bit. Sorry, we will be talking about these issues a little bit more in our discussion later on the state of open science.
I'll be very interested. Okay, I'll be interested in hearing then.
So one last question from John Borghi from the Lane Library. Thank you for a great talk. I was wondering if you had any advice about making the case for a position like yours at other universities.
Oh, several years of trying, but yeah, no, I think there is a lot of, I mean, just in a personal level, in any way I can help, I'll be happy to provide information about what we have been able to accomplish. I mean, I want to just be sure and modest. It's not necessarily just from me, but with my great colleagues and helping, working together in these university roles and coordinating this. But I think just what works might be different for depending on the university, how it's set up. But one of the things that we started is just creating some working groups and getting already from the people that are working across IT, library, and other groups with research administration, researchers, and stuff. And so just be able to already establish that how much there is need for coordinating across the university, and that if that happens to be only in one unit doing their own thing, that they duplicating a lot of efforts, and it becomes not only do you end up with different type of services, but that are not consistent, but also with creating a lot more cost for the university. So I think that if you could translate it to that, first gain enough support from just establishing the I mean, for me, one of the things that I always promote and I try to do is the collaboration. So I start collaborating with a lot of groups, and I try to make sure that you're connecting and learning about what's happening within the university and who's providing services that are important for these for accessing research data, for computing, for open science, and so and then from that, show the value that this brings, right? That when you're able to coordinate these efforts, you provide much better support for research.
Well, thanks very much. This has been incredibly enlightening. It's great to see, everything that you've been able to accomplish at Harvard, which is really impressive. So on behalf of everybody in the audience who can't clap for you, I will clap and say thank you again.